I love printing. I love printing. I love it. I f***ing love printing. Hey everybody, I want to welcome you back to another session of Printer to Printer with me, Warren Werbitt, otherwise known as the Print Whisperer. Today's session, we have as usual, another distinguished guest. We have John Hyde. How you doing, John?
I'm doing great, Warren. How are you today?
I'm good. It's the Wednesday before the holidays. This will only come out after the holidays, but it's all good. So just quickly, folks, today's session is not with a printer, obviously, you could see. It's with a financial guy. And I thought that we should be talking about business, recession, inflation, all that nasty money shit, because we're heading into January. And I'll tell you a little bit later on. But I got hit with the 2008 recession that wasn't really coming till it came. And anything that I could do to share my experiences. And I brought John on so that we can get some little tidbits on what people should be thinking about, because it really isn't fun when you're not doing well and all the pressure and all that other stuff. So before we get going, John, why don't you just tell us a little bit about you, what you do, who you are, just so that my viewership could have a better understanding.
Well, you mentioned the different economic conditions and things that are kind of the dark side of the economy and business. That's where I've spent my career. I'm a lawyer by background. I'm licensed to practice law in New York State. I haven't practiced law in 30 years. Rather, my career has been as a consultant, specializing in distressed company mergers and acquisitions and restructuring, and in particular, companies in the printing and graphics industry. So I have three sub-vertical markets, as they would say in marketing: the printing industry, expertise with troubled companies, and mergers and acquisitions, having been involved in all kinds of different deals over the past 25 plus years. Mostly in the recessionary time is when people start talking about these things. It's in good times that people don't necessarily think about what happens when it's hard to pay the bills. It's just the opposite. People are making money, they're doing well. But when it's time to start thinking about what do we do, all of a sudden my phone rings, and that's where I'm having interviews like this and all kinds of different opportunities. It's been interesting for sure.
Yeah, and I would think that by the time your phone rings with a lot of people, it's already a little too late.
It's never too late to have an outcome that you can find. I don't want to say find happiness, but there's
some
peace. That's exactly right. There's a big psychological part to my consulting practice. One of these days, I actually would threaten to bring in a psychologist to actually work with me. But the reality is that my clients are real people, Warren, like you. I don't have nameless, faceless institutions where it's all about spreadsheets and
billing.
I'm dealing with families, individuals, mothers, daughters, sons. It's personal. And therefore, the human element is one of the most important things to understand. And so when you talk about possible outcomes, a lot of times it's not about dollars and cents. It's about the emotional coming to grips with reality and helping people through a transition. Yes, my focus and my expertise is on the financial legal side of what they're dealing with, but it definitely carries over into understanding people and helping them with personal objectives.
Oh, well said. Well said. So I think I'll start off and the reason for today's video is I'm thinking about the current times. We come out of this pandemic, which I think, flattened a lot of people for in whatever way people want to take that. We're out of it now a couple of years. Governments in Canada and the US threw a lot of money at businesses, so people survived. But did they really survive? Some yes. But I think the bigger number in general is it's been tough. It's been tight. If you were into your line of credit before COVID started, it was a bigger struggle through. If you're into your line right now, Cash flow is for sure a problem. The last year, people buying inventory. A lot of people have too much inventory now. The fear of inventory or not having, spending more money on it. A lot of people with tight money. Then all of a sudden, inflation. I don't even, inflation, schmation. It's more about the interest rate that goes up a quarter point or a half point that then affects everybody's day-to-day in business. And here's another thing to think about. If your business is your life and everything you do revolves from your business, the interest going up a point, a quarter, whatever, also affects you at home because the money you're making at work is going home and your interest at home just went up on your mortgage. So you have a little less at home and you have a little less at work, right?
And your expenses, have you seen what it is to buy groceries? I mean, the popsicles that I like to get when I'm watching games at night, every time the packaging is smaller, there's less product in it, and it's the same or slightly greater price. I mean, how much more can it go up? So it's just not the popsicle.
Yeah, and it's funny you say popsicles because I noticed it with the chocolate bars that I buy for at night, and even when I went out to go buy some butter, I almost flipped. And I never noticed that stuff before. Now I'm noticing it. Yeah. So it's making me think about all the business. So interest goes up, financing is up. If you're going to buy, if you just bought something before, you're lucky. If you got to buy something now, you're paying 1, 2, 3, 4 points more on your interest. And if it's not a primary source of borrowing, you're paying a lot more if you're using a secondary source. And we know a lot of people use secondary sources because money gets a little tight. And anyways, I wanted to have this conversation with you, and I wanted to share some of my experience, just because, like what I said before, sometimes it's not too late, but it could feel like too late, right? When I think back to 2007, beginning of 2007, we were coming off 3, 4, 5 amazing years in business. I had more cash than I think I will ever see in the bank. I went out and things were happening. My lease was up. My press was dying. I needed to do some stuff. And I had this ginormous genius idea, which I get now and again. And that was I was going to go do an expansion, move the 3 companies that I had into one building. I was going to buy a new press. It was a 56-inch KBA for $5 million, which meant I needed a 56-inch plate setter and a cutter and a whatever. The whole thing was $7 million. I started this in the beginning of 2017. Right? Yes. The planning and then the purchase, the deposits, the whatever. All of a sudden, all that shit's happening with the mortgages and everything out of our control, and it's steamrolling. And then check this. The day I move into the new building, the machine is installed. I get up that morning. I go to the new front door. I pick up the newspaper. I pick it up and standing in my bathrobe on the street. And I'm like, holy fuck, Lehman Brothers just went bust. That was Warren Werbitt's welcome to the new world in 2008, right? We moved in, and I kid you not, it didn't take more than 18 months, and I was filing the American version of Chapter 11, right? Not pleasant. The psychological factor for myself, after having had so many great years and what I believed was always doing the right thing and speaking the right, language to everyone and just doing it right, employees, customers, charitable events. I felt embarrassed. I felt humiliated. I felt like a loser. I felt like just the world just came down on me and I was a nobody, right? And it all happened really fast. Fortunately, I had a really good support system. Fortunately, I rolled up my sleeves. I embraced it all. And I somehow, after filing for protection, I made it out of protection in 51 days from March 2018 to May 17th or something, 2018. So I found the money in the middle of the recession when the shit was happening. How did that happen? Really simply, it was all attributed to my reputation and the way I did business, because the people that I went to talk to and see, suppliers, vendors, and potential money, all had a great respect for me because I'm straight up. Anyways, this is really not about me. It's me just saying that I've lived it. I've experienced it. I felt it. The highs, the lows, the everything. And if I could bring any information to anybody out there who's feeling what I was feeling and living in the area that I was living in, right? And I used the analogy back then of, when you're standing in the middle of the fire, you don't smell your skin burning because it's 4th degree burns, right? It's a 24-hour-a-day heavy that sits on you. And even though the weekend comes and all your vendors and lawyers and accountants and trustees went home and they don't think about you, you live with you, right?
Well, I got to tell you, I do think of my clients. I don't have a volume practice. I'm a boutique consultant, so I feel their pain, and I think that makes me more effective. But I got to challenge you on something. You filed for bankruptcy. There's very few.
No, for protection.
Protection, right. Different
Yes.
country, different laws.
Yeah.
Let me just say, I don't know the Canadian equivalent of the U.S.
I know it now, unfortunately.
Yeah, you know it now. But in U.S. bankruptcy, and I do know that well, how many times have I recommended a client to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 20 plus years? Answer,
don't know.
Twice. It's so rare. Now, why? Because, Warren, the customers. How did your customers take it when they hear that you're filed for protection in Canada? Did it hurt you with customers?
So then let me just take a minute to tell you what I did, because I think what I did it differently. First thing that happened when I got wind of it after leaving the bank was that day I went home and got drunk because I didn't know what else to do. Right? I kid you not. The hangover in the morning is
step one in the playbook for it. Yes.
Yeah, but the morning hangover is no good. So next morning I went in right away. I gathered the entire company and I told them what was about to happen. I wanted them to hear before anybody else.
Yes.
Because by letting everyone know what's going to happen, there's no surprises. Then I went and I called, I honest to God, I called all my regular suppliers. Mm-hmm. And I said to them, this is the deal. This is what's happening. This is why I'm calling you. I'm not going anywhere. I'm taking the bull by the horns. And I didn't plan this because I'm on the hook for all this other money that I just did. All my suppliers were, oh my God, I can't believe you're phoning. Nobody's ever phoned us to tell us what was happening before we got the letter. Right, from the trustee saying,
wow.
And in doing that, don't let me make it seem like it was easy. Thank God for push button phones, because if it was a rotary phone, it wouldn't have happened. My hands were shaking. Right, I called all my suppliers, who were all unbelievably supportive at the time because I was straight, because I was honest, because I'm a promoter of the industry. I then went and started to call all of my large customers and say, this is the situation. This is where we're at. This is what I'm doing. We're good. But it's more important that I let you know so you don't hear from somebody else.
Right.
And if I tell you 94% of them stood by me, because I'm talking to business owners, other entrepreneurs, and I'm telling them my pains. One guy that I owed money to, said to me, blow it off for another 12 months. I'll pay you for the stuff that we're doing so that you get a good run. Your customers are generally good when you've always been straight and honest, right? And we managed to make it through because I was straight up and honest. And let me tell you, it was killing me inside every phone call I made and all that other stuff. It was a horrible experience. But I want to talk about what some companies should be looking at or thinking about so they don't have to put themselves in that shitty position that I was in, right? And it happens fast. It happens fast.
Did you find that the business deteriorated more as time went on and it kind of accelerated at the end and then you had a file?
No, the filing wasn't my choice. The filing was the bank's choice, who decided that they no longer wanted me in the printing business in their bank, right? Because they really were protected, the bank. And that's the other problem with banks.
So that was a tactical bank type situation.
But listen, with all fairness to the bank, they're not stupid. They foresaw perhaps something. Sorry, it's my dog's playing around. They foresaw something. Whether I agree or disagree, they've got more experience than me, right? So they took, and we know banks don't like print companies.
No, but it's surprising that the bank pushed it. That maybe that's different in the Canadian system. Two
Different
things are
banks, different philosophies.
Sorry?
Different banks, different
Mhm.
philosophies.
Yes,
Right.
yes,
Sometimes I've
yes.
seen banks all want an industry and then they go get it, and 5 years later they're done with it and they're pushing everybody out.
Absolutely. Yes.
Right. So more than that, though, what would you say to somebody, or how would you tell somebody to like wake up and look at their balance sheet and be smart? Because I chose to at times not be so smart or take it head on, because sometimes we get into situations we want to look the other way.
There is a element of procrastination. I'm back to my psychology. There is an element of avoidance, and it's human nature. You know, who wants to deal with this miserable stuff? But as an owner, you really don't have a choice. It's on you to face it. And the answers often are not necessarily on the balance sheet. They're more in the checkbook than on the balance sheet. The company running out of money precipitates the need to do something. And it's that fear of running out of money that I think gets people to the point of realizing they have to do something. It's the proverbial, I have to do something. That's one critical point in the process. Another critical point is after, whether they are bringing in advisors or taking steps to either fix the business or sell it. Along the way, there's another reckoning, and that is whether you're keeping the business and therefore your actions are about survival, or whether you know that this is a transition because it can't be fixed, it can't be saved, and this is now going to be for sure a sale of the business or winding it down, and that becomes another point along the way. So I think it's really two things. It's the realization that you have to do something, and when you get to the point that you realize that the ship has sailed and you're not going to be continuing to do this, and then you start thinking about, okay, how do we get the best deal possible? And it's the best, I'm jumping ahead, it's the best deal for creditors, because by then the company that has a lot of debt, that's in a difficult situation, the duty is to get the best deal for creditors, not for shareholders at that point. So a lot of this is not necessarily in the legal financial stuff. It's in the emotional state of how somebody looks at their company under the backdrop of these sort of problems.
Yeah, I think it's on the emotional side. I think it's a couple things. I think it's just the person's own will to survive, the emotion of the build up of owning, building, and having that, right? It being their lives, and then I think it's also hearing the reality of what it is, right? I think in my case, I saw some and heard some, but almost didn't want to believe either of it. And when you do that, it just delays more of the other stuff that has to be dealt with, because it doesn't get easier. You got to deal with the bad, right, before it gets better. And dealing with the bad is hard, right? Because you don't want to do it, but you have to.
And the universe of people that the owner could talk to is it's shrinking as it goes. It's, how do you really have these conversations? It's very difficult. I know it's
so I've always made it a point to be surrounded by some pretty decent people, and I somehow took ownership of the situation. I went to talk to a couple people and I put everything on the table. I didn't want to hear what I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear what I had to hear. Okay, I think that's a very important point for people. Hearing what you want is never what you're going to use to get done. Hearing what you don't want to hear is where all the information is that you need to assemble together and then figure out what your path of attack is going forward.
Right.
And so I'll tell you, then the other thing that in my notes, I mentioned it before, in going to talk to other people about your situation in business, it can be, or I felt, I won't say for anyone, I felt like a bit of a failure. I felt a little bit of embarrassment, right, from coming from where I was. But I also learned this: everyone you see on the way up, you kind of see on the way down. And if you didn't treat people right on the way up, they don't treat you right on the way down.
Yep.
Right. And if you didn't do it right and you hit that windshield, your head's going through your ass so fast you don't even know it smacked you. And fortunately, in my case, and I didn't know that I did all the right things, but I guess I did because people were really kind, respectful, and comforting in the situation, which made it a little better, but still didn't deal with how I was really feeling internally and trying to get through the stuff, right? So I think finding the right professional is important too. Finding a professional to talk with before you're even in a situation that could look at it, that you feel comfortable with, and that you don't feel like they're just there for the billing.
Exactly.
Right. And I know all the lawyers, accountants, professionals listening to me are all turning in their seats. Well, you know what? Most of you really are out there for the billing, and you aren't that homey and friendly. But you got to find somebody who gives you that good feeling, because you have work to do.
Absolutely right. The
right?
critical selection of who the key professionals are, it's just so important. And there has to be a personal chemistry, not just an expertise, because there are going to be very difficult decisions that the owner has to make. And often that's done on the fly under extreme stress with huge ramifications. And whoever is working with you on that, you got to feel that there's a camaraderie in a sense that you're on the same team. So that's it's not always easy to select the right professionals. A lot of that comes from word of mouth and other people's experiences. Oh yeah, I heard somebody did, and you go to whoever their professional was. But you have to remember also, there's a lot of talk that's BS with this stuff too. So you have to have the BS.
Yeah, it's going to sound kind of bad, maybe, but it's the professional world. It's the non-tangible billing world where, it is what it is. That's a whole other session. So what do people do? What do you suggest to people when they're looking at their numbers and they're getting a sense that something's going a little bit off the chart, right? What's the first 2-3 things people should do when they're feeling a bit of pain?
The first thing that I would recommend is to try to determine what is the nature of the problem and is that fixable. And while that might seem easy for me to say here, I'm not the one who actually has to do that. So I get to say that, but it's the owner and their management that has to really do the deep dive to determine, why are we losing money? Why is cash tight? And use professionals and resources to support that. But that's an internal exercise that has to come from the company's ownership and management. And it's too easy just to say, well, sales are off. That's not the answer. You got to go deeper than that. It's more about margins, about costs. I remember one client said, we could control our costs. We can't control our revenues. So the cost side of the business is so critical, and that doesn't mean just keep cutting. I'm not a believer that you could ever cut your way into survival or prosperity. That's not that might be temporary, but that's not really the underlying fix. So I go back to the first thing: are the problems, identifying the problems, and are they fixable? And when you talk about fixing it, you have to then get into two things: time and money. And is it something that is fixable within the remaining lifespan of the business? Remember, if the company is losing money, think of it this way: it's every day it's getting worse because it's not getting better. So what can be done quickly and within the reach of management to change that? And is there enough time and enough money to make those changes? That's where a lot of the initial thinking needs to be.
Yeah, no, it's the first reaction out of the gate. Because
let me tell you that where it goes wrong. Where it goes wrong is that a tendency then kicks in to not dismiss, but to kind of gloss over the harder decisions because they're uncomfortable. And remember, you and I haven't talked about this yet today, Warren, but a lot of the printing industry are family businesses. And there's this incredible succession overhang in our industry. You have family businesses that really haven't fully dealt with the long-term succession challenges of having the business going from one generation to the next. And you filter that into the difficulties of making the determination as to whether the problems are fixable, and you throw in this succession aspect, your head will spin. I mean, it makes it incredibly hard. So sometimes there's a succession problem or challenge that creates a dynamic that almost prevents the owner from really getting to the underlying issues. Or on the other hand, sometimes the succession puts it into a positive state where the owner says, look, we've got to fix this. We have family here, and you kind of rally the troops and it becomes a positive. All I'm saying is that the first challenge of determining the problems and whether they're fixable, it's not done in a vacuum. It's not, like I said before, it's not Wall Street. It's not spreadsheets, spreadsheets to a point. But you need to also realize that these are families, and it just complicates things and makes it harder. And in some cases, it could make it easier, but that's rare.